Hello everybody and welcome to WEBfactory 2010. In this video tutorial we're gonna talk about the WEBfactory User Manager inside WEBfactory Studio. In this first part of the tutorial I'm gonna go through the creation of a new user, through the usage of write signals, usage of project authorization and usage of authorization groups. But first, to access the User Manager from the WEBfactory Studio, you must go to the Settings tab on the left panel of the WEBfactory Studio, and inside the Settings tab look for the User Manager right under the Project Settings. So under the Project Settings, click on the User Manager and the application will load in the right part of the studio. As you can see, in my User Manager I have no user defined, and the first thing we're gonna do in the User Manager is define a new user. Now, the Users section of the User Manager is the first section you're gonna see when you're gonna open up the User Manager, and in this section, to the right of the menu drop-down button, we have the new WEBfactory User drop-down button. And it is a drop-down because if we press the arrow pointing down, we're gonna see we have another option of creating a new Active Directory user. But we're gonna talk about the Active Directory user in the second part of our tutorial. So for now, I'm gonna create a new WEBfactory user. And I'm gonna name my user Test User. In the right panel of our User Manager, you can see we have two different tabs, the General tabs and the Details tab. Now, in these two tabs we can fill in details about our user. And in the General tab, as you can see, we can fill in the description for our user, we can toggle our user active, you can select a user level or allow multiple logons. We can also set the auto log-off interval in case we want this, or the maximum number of failed logons. We can log the activities, we can allow privileged writing, or we can make the password expire. Now also we can set the password over here, but to set the password we will need to save the user, as you can see in our message over here. So the test user 1 is now saved, and I'm going to define a password for my new user, and for this I'm going to click the button right to the password field which is deemed right now. So I'm going to click the button and enter a new password. I'm going to click OK to confirm and save again our user, and now we have a user with a password. Now, in the Details tab, we can fill in the details related to the user's identity. We can fill in the name, the last name, the company, the plant, the personal number, the RFID serial number, and the maintenance forecast, if there is one, of course. Now, if we look to the bottom panel of the User Manager, we can see we have the Authorization Groups panel. Now, in this panel we have listed all the authorization groups that we have defined inside our User Manager. In this case we have only Authorization Group 1 defined, and I'm gonna click this to make my user a part of this authorization group. And for this user to be active, we're gonna have to toggle the active checkbox right over here. And if we save our user, we can see the active checkbox is toggled in our user list also. Speaking of authorization groups, we're gonna click on the menu of the User Manager and go to the authorization groups for a while and talk about them. In WEBfactory User Manager, authorizations and permissions are organized in groups. For a user to have a specific authorization, he must be assigned to an authorization group, and like we did for our user, we have assigned the user to the authorization group 1. Now, the User Manager offers the possibility to create, delete and manage authorization groups in this authorization group view. And to create a new group, we're gonna click on the New button, and we're gonna have two authorization groups defined over here. I'm gonna save the change so we have both authorization groups saved in our User Manager. And I'm going to look through the settings of the first authorization group. And we have here in the top right panel of our User Manager the General settings, and we have the name of the authorization group, the description, and the check access group checkbox. Now, if the check access group button is checked, the user will be granted the authorization group permissions only if the conditions specified in the access groups are met. So basically, the user manager will check the access group for the conditions and then allow the user to have all the permissions that our authorization group has. Let's focus on the bottom part of our authorization groups window. And the first thing we're gonna see in our bottom panel is the right groups tab. As we have no right groups defined, we're gonna do this later. I will explain you what the right groups are. So the right groups are basically virtual entities that correspond to both signals and users. When a signal is assigned to a right group, the members of that right group will have the rights to write the value of the signal. So the users who are not members of this right group, which will be over here, will only be able to read the value of the signal and not to write the value of the signal that is assigned to this right group. And to create the first right group, we're gonna save the settings just to make sure and go into the Signals tab of the WEBfactory Studio. And right here, under our server, we have the right groups. And I'm gonna go inside our main panel, click right and select New Right Group. And I'm gonna name this right group just like this. Right Group 1. Now we have our right group, and we're gonna go into our signals and select a few signals like these four and assign them to our new created right group, the right group 1. And we're gonna save the signals inside our right group 1, and if we go to the settings user manager, we're gonna see that we have the right group under our right groups tab inside our authorization group 1 settings. And I'm gonna click the checkbox in front of my right group and save the settings, and this way the users that will be a part of my authorization group 1 will be a part of our right group and will have access to writing our signals. And our signals are these 4 signals that are assigned to our right group. So the users assigned to the authorization group 1 will also be able to write the signals assigned to this right group. Now, our next tab after our right group tabs is the alarm types. The alarm types tab lists the types of alarms that the members of this authorization group can receive. So if we click this checkbox, the users assigned to our authorization group will receive the alarms contained by this alarm type. The alarm groups are virtual entities used to organize alarms of different types. The alarm groups are custom made. If an alarm group is selected, the members of this authorization group will receive only the alarms that are assigned to this alarm group. So I'm gonna check this alarm group, so my user that will be part of our authorization group 1 will receive only the alarms that are members of this alarm group. In the Project Authorization tab, we can see we have a project authorization defined. Now, project authorizations are custom virtual authorization entities that allow the customization of system authorizations. The project authorizations can be created depending on the project needs. So these authorizations are used in managing control behaviors. For example, a control can be set up to be displayed if a user is a member of an authorization group that has a specific project authorization, or can be hidden if the authorization group that the user is part of does not have that specific project authorization. So we're gonna assume that we're gonna need this project authorization later, and I'm gonna leave it marked and I'm gonna save my settings. Now, the system authorizations are built-in presets that allow the administrator to establish the access to different WEBfactory system components. The system authorizations cannot be changed or customized because this is why we have the project authorizations. So, our authorization group 1 will have access to all these system authorizations because we may want the users which are part of this authorization group to have administrator privileges. Now, the Access Group tab provides the option of assigning access authorizations to the authorization groups. Access authorizations restrict the location from where the system can be accessed. Access authorizations are grouped in access groups, so one access group contains multiple access authorizations. The access authorizations can be set up over here, and I'm gonna save these settings and go into the access authorizations for a second. And as you can see over here, we can set up access authorizations in this menu. We can name the access authorization, we can add a description, and we can restrict the access of our user using the computer name. And inside here I'm gonna put a computer name. We want only this computer to have access to our system, so we're gonna use the access via computer name option. Of course, we can always use access via IP, and we can define an IP address and a net mask. So I'm gonna save these settings and go back to our authorization groups, and I'm gonna check the access group 1 because I want to have access to the WEBfactory system only from this computer, the PC1. Now we have one more tab inside our authorization group settings, and this is the scheduler locations. Now the scheduler location tabs allows the administrator to assign a location defined in Scheduler Pro right over here to the authorization group. Now the members of the group will only have access to the location selected in the Scheduler Locations tab. If no location is selected, the user will have access to all available locations. So the schedule locations are created inside the Scheduler Pro application and not inside our user manager. This is everything about the authorization groups for now, and we're gonna move on, and I'm gonna show you how you create project authorization, access group, and access authorizations. We have talked about these three before, but I'm gonna go through all the menu items of the user manager. So the project authorization view allows us to create project authorizations, and these project authorizations are pretty simple. They only have name and description because, if we remember, these are customizable. So we're gonna use them for our own project, and we're gonna define the way we use these project authorizations at design time. Now, the access groups are created in the access groups view of the user manager, and we can create a new access group by clicking on the new button over here, and we can assign access authorizations right over here in our access groups. And our access authorizations can be defined in this view. And over here, if clicking on the new button, we can create as many access authorizations we want, and each access authorization will have its own setting. So for example, for this first access authorizations, I'm gonna have the access via computer name option enabled, and I'm gonna use this PC1 computer name. And for my second access authorization, I'm gonna use the IP that is selected over here, and in my case, this is 0000. Now, this is everything about the user manager for now. I'm gonna get back in the second part of this video tutorial when we're gonna talk about Active Directory users and more interesting features of WEBfactory User Manager. So stay tuned and see you later.